my friend. Welcome to the study. I'm looking at some maps. This one is Fra Mauro's map from 1459. You can see that the south is on the top and north is near the bottom. There's Europe, Italy, Greece, Turkey, Spain, France, and then Britain, Ireland, and some interesting islands. What can these islands to the north and northwest of Britain be? This one is the Catalan Atlas, also upside down in the northern latitudes. We will have a look at this one and a few other maps today and try to discover something about this island north of Britain called Thule. And looking at northern Europe, we can see here Insula Arcania. What are these mysterious islands in the far northern latitudes? Thule. Here is a name that has etched itself into the psyche of adventurers and explorers through the ages. A name evoking a place beyond the known world, unattainable except to those with true mettle and an inquisitive spirit, a place of myth and mystery. Seneca the Younger wrote of a day when new lands would be discovered beyond Thule, but it was Vergil who coined the term Ultima Thule, farthermost Thule, in his Georgics, playing off the idea and in turn your sense of a far-off land or an unattainable goal. Quid faciat laetas segetis, quo sidera terram vertere, Maecenas ulmisque adiungere vitis conveniat, quae cura bom, qui cultus habendo sit pecori, appibus quanta experienta parcis, hinc canere incipiam. What makes the crops joyous beneath what star, Maecenas? It is well to turn the soil and wet vines to elms. What tending the cattle need, what care the herd and breeding, what skill the thrifty bees. Hence shall I begin my song, O most radiant lights of the firmament, that guide through heaven the gliding year. O liber and bounteous Ceres, if by your grace earth changed Chaonia's acorn for the rich corn ear, and blended draughts of Achelous with the new-found grapes, and you, fawns, the rustics' ever-present gods, come tripid fawns and dryad maids withal, 'tis of your bounties I sing. And Neptune, for whom earth, smitten by your mighty trident, first sent forth the neighing steed, you too, spirit of the groves, Aristaeus, for whom thrice 100 snowy steers crop Chaos' rich thickets, you too, Pan, guardian of the sheep, leaving your native woods and glades of Lycaeus, as you love your own, Maianalus, come of your grace, Tegean Lord, come, Minerva, inventress of the olive, you too, youth, Triptolemus, who showed to man the crooked plough, and you, Sylvanus, with a young uprooted cypress in your hand, and gods and goddesses all, whose love guards our fields, both you who nurse the young fruits springing up unsown, and you who on the seedlings sent down from heaven plenteous rain, and you above all, Caesar, whom we know not what company of the gods shall claim ere long, whether you choose to watch over cities and care for our lands, that so the great globe may receive you as the giver of increase and lord of the seasons, wreathing your brows with your mother's myrtle, whether you come as god of the boundless sea, and sailors worship your deity alone, while farthest Thule owns your lordship, and Tethys, with the dowry of all her waves, buys you to wed her daughter, or whether you add yourself as a new star to the lingering months, where, between the virgin and the grasping claws, a space is opening. For you even now the blazing scorpion draws in his arms, and has left more than a due portion of the heavens, whatever you are to be. For Tartarus hopes not for you as king, and may such monstrous lust of empire never seize you. Though Greece is enchanted by the Elysian fields, and Proserpine, reclaimed, cares not to follow her mother. Grant me a calm voyage give assent to my bold emprise, and pitying with me the rustics who know not their way, enter upon your kingdom, and learn even now to hearken to our prayers. It was around 330 BC that Pytheas, a merchant from Massilia, modern-day Marseille, undertook a voyage that would take him far beyond boundaries of the known world of the Mediterranean and its realm. Living in the Greek trading city of Massilia, Pytheas was in a position to talk to seafarers and traders about their travels and encounters, or, even as has been postulated, to undertake a scouting journey for trade in the north. A skilled navigator, astronomer, and mariner, it is no surprise that his account of his own voyage on the ocean, or in Greek, ta perito okeano, has survived the millennia. It tells of his sea journey to the British Isles, the North Sea, and northeastern Europe, mysterious lands that were the sources of the Mediterranean's supply of tin, amber, and gold. Written in Greek around 325 BC, it is perhaps the earliest description of the British Isles and their inhabitants, as well as of other islands far to the north, about which the Greeks knew very little, if anything at all. Although Pytheas' account seems to have been well known in antiquity, only fragments of it have survived the ages, and those only in excerpts or paraphrased in the writings of other classical authors. On the ocean, rather than being a pilot guide for navigation, seems to have been perhaps more ambitious in scale. Pytheas writes firsthand of his voyage and includes astronomical, geographic, biological, oceanographic, and anthropological observations, making it of immense value to historians today. It has never been determined with any degree of certainty how Pytheas travelled and what kinds of vessels he used. If he was a merchant, as were his compatriots in Massalia, Pytheas may have sailed on a holcus, that sturdy Greek cargo ship that had a large draft, was flat-bottomed and round-hulled, and was propelled mainly by sail, as opposed to the sleeker Greek warships known as triremes. Pytheas set out from Massalia and sailed west through the Pillars of Hercules, now known as the Straits of Gibraltar, and into the Atlantic Ocean. He cruised north along the coasts of Spain and France, and possibly made landfall in Brittany. From there he crossed the English Channel and arrived at a place he called Belerion, which was perhaps modern-day Cornwall. It was here that he observed the inhabitants mining tin to trade to Gaul and the Mediterranean. Leaving southwestern Britain, Pytheas proceeded north along the coast of Wales, possibly landing on the Isle of Man before sailing up the west coast of Scotland and passing between the outer and inner Hebrides. There he made a number of landfalls and took a number of latitudinal readings with his gnomon or cross staff, an instrument used to calculate position by taking measurements of the sun's shadow from different latitudes. It is from there that Pytheas set out on the most daring leg of his voyage, leaving Britain behind to the south and venturing into the North Sea, or, as some believe, into the North Atlantic. According to Strabo, Pytheas sailed for 6 days before encountering a landmass he called Thule. It was at this place, in the northern latitudes, that he witnessed a wholly alien phenomenon for an inhabitant from the Mediterranean, the nearly continuous daylight of the northern summer. Pliny the Elder remarks, "Hence it follows that in consequence of the daylight increasing in various degrees, in Meroe the longest day consists of 12 equinoctial hours, and 8 parts of an hour, at Alexandria of 14 hours, in Italy of 15, in Britain of 17, where the degree of light which exists in the night very clearly proves what the reason of the thing also obliges us to believe, that during the solstitial period, as the sun approaches to the pole of the world, and his orbit is contracted, the parts of the earth that lie below him have a day of 6 months long, and a night of equal length when he is removed to the South Pole." Pytheas of Marseille informs us that this is the case in the island of Thule, which is 6 days' sail from the north of Britain. Some persons also affirm that this is the case in Mona, which is about 200 miles from Camaldonum, a town of Britain. The Thule of Pliny has been generally supposed to have been the Shetland Islands, though the length of the day described here, as well as the distance from Britain, would indeed apply much more correctly to Iceland than to the Shetlands. But it is more likely that Pliny had more second-hand knowledge of the Shetlands from which to collate his information. A day's sail north from Thule, Pytheas writes, lies the congealed sea, perhaps the frozen Arctic Ocean. From this point, heavy fog, extreme cold, and thick ice floes would have prevented further travel to the north. Of interest to natural science is Pytheas' description of a place where neither earth, water, nor air exist separately, but a sort of concretion of all these, resembling a sea lung, or the Greek word for jellyfish, in which the earth, the sea, and all things were suspended, thus forming, as it were, a link to unite the whole together. This is presumed to be the phenomenon of pancake ice. Flat, floating ice floes on the surface of the ocean, edges made fluffy by the wave motion and the salinity of the water, looking somewhat like jellyfish. Returning from Thule, Pytheas sailed down the east coast of Britain and rounded the Kent Peninsula, which he called Cantillon, achieving thereby a circumnavigation of the island. However, instead of returning west, Pytheas turned east, sailing along the northern coastline of Europe. Pliny writes that he encountered a Germanic tribe, the Goethes, who inhabited the shores of a large estuary. He also made landfall on an island presumed to be Helgoland. It is possible that Pytheas was extending his journey in search of the source of the prized amber, possibly traveling into the Baltic Sea. Pytheas made it as far as the Vistula River in modern-day Poland. Here he finally turned to the long sail back to the Mediterranean and home to Massalia. After his return, he wrote on the ocean. It was soon after this, in 320 BC, that it was first cited by the classical writer Tacitus, a student of Aristotle. Thereafter, Pytheas' work was widely circulated, studied, and analyzed, as well as discussed for at least the next 2 centuries. Until Tacitus and Julius Caesar, On the Ocean was likely the only source of information about Britain and the northern latitudes. Copies of it could be found in the great libraries of Pergamon and Alexandria, where Eratosthenes probably obtained a copy of it. Over the subsequent tumultuous centuries, however, On the Ocean was lost, and with it an account of one of classical antiquity's most significant voyages of discovery. Today, only fragments and echoes of it survive, but they have proven profound and inextinguishable. They point to a careful and objective account containing valuable information for modern scholars, such as its discussion of the moon's influence on the tides, its description of the midnight sun, its precise measurements of latitudes, and its ethnographic depictions of native peoples. Still discernible is a man not only skilled in navigation and the ways of the sea, but also possessed of a capacious intellectual curiosity that exceeded the bounds of his Mediterranean realm. The texts that we have today referencing Pytheas' work on the ocean are numerous. Some of them we will name here. Polybius, circa 200 BC to 118 BC, was a Greek historian. Skeptical that such a voyage could have been undertaken, he devotes Book 34 of his Histories to an extended polemic against Pytheas. This influence on the geographer Strabo, 63 BC to AD 24, who in his work, Geography, calls Pytheas the worst possible liar, and when he quotes Pytheas, it is done to discredit him and cast doubt on the validity of his voyage. Some have put the criticism of these authors down to jealousy, for there's little else to suggest that their knowledge of these latitudes could have been greater. Indeed, if Pytheas was lying, he certainly did it in great detail. The historian Timaeus, circa 345 BC to 250 BC, wrote a history of Sicily and the western Mediterranean. It is likely he had read on the ocean, as he quoted from it on numerous occasions. Likewise, only fragments survive from the work of the renowned geographer and chief librarian at Alexandria, Eratosthenes of Cyrene, circa 276 BC to 194 BC, who also referenced Pytheas in his geographic work, now lost. The 1st century BC Greek astronomer Geminus of Rhodes wrote that the name Thule had its origins in an archaic word for the polar night phenomenon, the place where the sun goes to rest. Aviennius, in his Aura Maritima, added that during the summer on Thule, night lasted only 2 hours. It is generally agreed that Pliny, AD 23 to 79, gleaned much of his knowledge about Pytheas from Timaeus. Like Timaeus, he quoted on the ocean a number of times in his work on natural history. Another reader of Timaeus was the Greek historian Diodorus Siculus, 90 to 30 BC, who wrote his monumental Bibliotheca Historica around the time of Augustus, used Timaeus references to On the Ocean in his discussion of ancient Britain. The Roman historian Tacitus, in his book chronicling the life of his father-in-law Agricola, describes that the Romans knew that Britain, where Agricola had been commander, was an island rather than a continent by its circumnavigability. Tacitus writes of a Roman ship visiting Orkney and claims the ship's crew even sighted Thule, though some scholars believe that Tacitus, like Pliny, might have been referring to the Shetlands. Cornelius Tacitus writes, "The geography and inhabitants of Britain, already described by many writers, I will speak of, not that my research and ability may be compared with theirs, but because the country was then for the first time thoroughly subdued, and so matters, which as being still not accurately known my predecessors embellished with their eloquence, shall now be related on the evidence of facts. Britain, the largest of the islands which Roman geography includes, is so situated that it faces Germany on the east, Spain on the west, On the south it is even within sight of Gaul. Its northern extremities, which have no shores opposite to them, are beaten by the waves of a vast open sea. The form of the entire country has been compared by Livy and Fabius Rusticus, the most graphic among ancient and modern historians, to an oblong shield or battle axe. And this, no doubt, is its shape without Caledonia, so that it has become the popular description of the whole island. There is, however, a large and irregular tract of land which juts out from its furthest shores, tapering off in a wedge-like form. Round these coasts of remotest ocean, the Roman fleet then for the first time sailed, ascertained that Britain is an island, and simultaneously discovered and conquered what are called the Orcades Islands, hitherto unknown. Thule, too, was described in the distance, which as yet had been hidden by the snows of winter. Those waters, they say, are sluggish, and yield with difficulty to the oar, and are not even raised by the wind as other seas. The reason, I suppose, is that lands and mountains, which are the cause and origin of storms, are here comparatively rare, and also that the vast depths of that unbroken expanse are more slowly set in motion. But to investigate the nature of the ocean and the tides is no part of the present work, and many writers have discussed the subject. I would simply add that nowhere has the sea a wider dominion, that it has many currents running in every direction, that it does not merely flow and ebb within the limits of the shore, but penetrates and winds far inland, and finds a home among hills and mountains, as though in its own domain. Silius Italicus, AD 25 to 101, confusing Thule with Scotland, possibly having read Julius Caesar's account of the blue-painted Britons, wrote, "The blue-painted native of Thule, when he fights, drives around the close-packed ranks in his scythe-bearing chariot." Pictus, meaning painted, described the Pictic tribes of northern Britannia. It was only a short time after Silius Italicus, though, that a work of prose fiction in Greek by Antonius Diogenes, entitled The Wonders Beyond Thule, circa AD 150, wherein Thule most closely matches Iceland rather than Scotland, implied a different set of sources. Early in the 5th century AD, Claudian, in his poem on the 4th consulship of the Emperor Honorius, Book 8, describes the conquests of the Emperor Theodosius I, writing that the Orcades, modern-day Orkneys, ran red with Saxon slaughter. Thule was warm with the blood of Picts. Ice-bound Hibernia, Ireland, wept for the heaps of slain Scots. But in the second poem, against Rufinus, he writes that Thule lies ice-bound pole star, demonstrating the ambiguity with which Thule was understood in the Roman world. The known world of the Europeans came to be viewed as bounded in the east by India and in the west by Thule, as Pytheas writes in his Consolation of Philosophy. For though the earth as far as India's shore tremble before the laws you give, though Thule bow to your service on earth's farthest bounds, yet if thou canst not drive away black cares, if thou canst not put to flight complaints, then is no true power thine. In the early 7th century, Isidore of Seville writes in his etymologies that Ultima Thule is an island of the ocean in the northwestern region beyond Britannia, taking its name from the sun, because there the sun makes its summer solstice, and there is no daylight beyond it, its sea sluggish and frozen. Isidore distinguished this and the islands of Britannia, such as Thanet and Orcades, and Ireland, Scotia, and Hibernia, which was to have a significant influence upon Bede when he mentioned Thule in his 7th to 8th century chronicle. By the later Middle Ages, the name of Thule became linked to Iceland, or places described by the 6th century Irish mariner, Saint Brendan, and also to other far distant or even mythical places, such as High Brasil, a mythical island off the coast of Ireland that is shrouded in mist except for one day every 7 years, when it becomes visible, yet still cannot be reached. Or even to Cockaigne, the mythical land of pleasure and plenty. Even Petrarch, in the 14th century, wrote in his Epistolae Familiares that Thule lay in the unknown regions of the far northwest. This elusive island and its mystique was taken up with alacrity by the pensive romantics of the 18th and 19th centuries. Ambrose Phillips wrote a fable of Thule and left it unfinished in 1748, and later Goethe wrote a poem about the king of Thule, which was depicted in a painting by the Dutch painter Pierre-Jean van der Odera, as well as set to music by Franz Schubert, Franz Liszt, and Robert Schumann. And Edgar Allan Poe also composed a poem that echoes the wistfulness and pathos that this island's image had begun to take on. Let's read some of these poems. Ambrose Phillips, The Fable of Thule. Far northward, as the Dane extends his sway, where the sun glances but a sloping ray, beneath the sharpest rigor of the skies, disdainful Thule's wintry island lies. Unhappy maid, thy tale forgotten long, shall virgins learn from my instructive song, and every youth who lingers in despair, by thy example warm the cruel fair. In Cyprus, sacred to the Queen of Love, where stands her temple and her myrtle grove, was Thule born, uncertain how 'tis said, once Venus won Adonis to her bed, and pregnant grew the birth to chance assigned in woods, and fostered by the feathered kind, with flowers some strew the helpless orphan round, with downy moss some spread the carpet ground, some ripened fruits, some fragrant honey bring, and some fetch water from the running spring, while others warble from the boughs to cheer their infant charge, and tune her tender ear. Soon as the sun forsakes the evening skies, and hid in shades the gloomy forest lies, the nightingales their tuneful vigils keep, and lull her with their gentler strains to sleep. This the prevailing rumour, as she grew, no dubious token spoke the rumour true. In every forming feature might be seen some bright resemblance of the Cyprian queen. Nor was it hard the hunter youth to trace in all her early passion for the chase. And when on springing flowers she reclined, she sung, the birds upon the bending branches hung, while, warbling, she expressed their various strains, and at a distance charmed the listening swains. So sweet her voice resounded through the wood, they thought the nymph some siren from the flood, half human, thus by lineage, half divine, in forests did the lonely beauty shine, like woodland flowers which paint the desert glades, and waste their sweets in unfrequented shades. No human face she saw, and rarely seen by human face, a solitary queen. She ruled and ranged her shady empire round. No horn the silent huntress bears, no hound with noisy cry disturbs her solemn chase. Swift as the bounding stag she wings her pace, and bend whene'er she will her ebon bow. A speedy death arrests the flying foe, the bow the hunting goddess first supplied, and ivory quiver across her shoulders tied. The imperious queen of heaven with jealous eyes beholds the blooming virgin from the skies, at once admires and dreads her growing charms, and sees the god already in her arms. In vain she finds her bitter tongue reprove his broken vows and his clandestine loves. Jove still continues frail, and all in vain does Thule in obscurest shades remain, while Maia's son, the thunderer's winged spy, informs him where the lurking beauties lie. What sure expedient then shall Juno find to calm her fears and ease her boding mind? Delays to jealous minds a torment prove, and Thule ripens every day for love. She mounts her car and shakes the silken reins. The harnessed peacocks spread their painted trains and smooth their glossy necks against the sun. The wheels along the level azure run. Eastward the goddess guides her gaudy team, and perfects, as she rides, her forming scheme. The various orbs now best adown steep of heaven the chariot whirs, and plunges deep in fleecy clouds, which o'er the midland main hang poised in air, to bless the isles with rain. And here the panting birds repose a while, not so their queen. She gains the Cyprian isle, by speedy zephyrs borne in thickened air. Unseen she seeks, unseen she finds the fair. Now o'er the mountain tops the rising sun shot purple rays. Now Thule had begun her morning chase, and printed in the dews her fleeting steps the goddess now pursues. Now overtakes her in the full career, and flings a javelin at the flying deer. Amazed, the virgin huntress turns her eyes, when Juno, now Diana in disguise, let no vain terrors discompose thy mind. My second visit, like my first, is kind. The ivory quiver and thy ebon bow did not I give. Here sudden blushes glow on Thule's cheeks. Her busy eyes survey the dress, the crescent, and her doubts give way. I own thee, goddess bright, the nymph replies. Goddess, I own thee, and thy favours prize. Goddess of woods, and lawns and level plains, fresh in my mind thine image still remains. Then Juno, beauteous ranger of the grove, my darling care, fair object of my love, hither I come, urged by no trivial fears, to guard thy bloom and warm thy tender years. And that remains unfinished by Mr. Phillips. We can imagine that the confrontation between the goddess and the nymph eventually resulted in Thule's banishment to the ends of the earth, where the island now lies, practically unattainable. Johann Wolfgang Goethe. Der König in Thule. Es war ein König in Thule, gar treu bis an das Grab, dem sterbend seine Bühle einen goldenen Becher gab. Es ging ihm nichts darüber, er lehrt ihn jeden Schmaus, die Augen gingen ihm über, so oft er trank daraus. Und als er kam zu sterben, zählt er seine Städte im Reich, gönnt alles seinen Erben, den Becher nicht zugleich. Er saß beim Königsmahle, die Ritter um ihn her, auf hohem Wettersaale, dort auf dem Schloss am Meer. Dort stand der alte Zecher, trank letzte Lebensglut und warf den heiligen sah ihn stürzen, trinken und sinken tief ins Meer. Die Augen täten ihm sinken, trank nie einen Tropfen mehr. Dreamland by Edgar Allan Poe. By a route obscure and lonely, haunted by ill angels only, where an eidolon named Night on a black throne reigns upright. I have reached these lands but newly, from an ultimate dim Thule, from a wild weird clime that lieth sublime, out of space and out of time. Bottomless vales and boundless floods, and chasms and caves and titan woods, with forms that no man can discover, for the tears that drip all over. Mountains toppling evermore into seas without a shore, seas that restlessly aspire, surging unto skies of fire, lakes that endlessly outspread their lone waters, lone and dead. Their sad waters, sad and chilly, with the snows of the lolling lily, by the mountains near the river, murmuring lowly, murmuring ever, by the grey woods, by the swamp, where the toad and the newt encamp, by the dismal tarns and pools, where dwell the ghouls, by each spot the most unholy, in each nook most melancholy, there the traveller meets aghast, sheeted memories of the past, shrouded forms that start and sigh as they pass the wanderer by, white-robed forms of friends long given in agony to the earth and heaven. For the heart whose woes are legion, 'tis a peaceful, soothing region. For the spirit that walks in shadow, 'tis El Dorado. But the traveller travelling through it may not, dare not openly view it. Never its mysteries are exposed to the weak human eye enclosed. So wills its king who hath forbid the uplifting of the fringed lid, and thus the sad soul that here passes beholds it but through darkened glasses, by a route obscure and lonely, haunted by ill angels only, where an eidolon named Night on a black throne reigns upright. I have wandered home but newly, from this ultimate dim Thule. Many people, from enthusiasts to geographers, to historians, to linguists, have hypothesized the location of this island of Thule. Suggestions have included Iceland, the Shetlands, the Orkneys, and the Faroes, and even islands off Norway or Estonia. But there is no consensus, and what the ages have left us of Pytheas' accounts will not elucidate the matter further. The name, however, Thule, has been fixed in the minds of explorers ever since, from Pliny to Captain Cook, explorers, and even astronomers, and Thule pops up everywhere to remind us of the ancient explorer and his intrepid spirit, but also his curiosity and drive to experience personally the new and unexplored, to bring the mystic north closer to the Mediterranean, and to share his observations. Interesting to note are the writings of an Irish monk, Duquesne, in his Liber de Mensura Orbis Terrae, written circa 825, who, after quoting various classical sources describing Thule, writes, "It is now 30 years since clerics, who had lived on the island from the 1st of February to the 1st of August, told me that not only at the summer solstice, but in the days round about it, the sun setting in the evening hides itself as though behind a small hill, in such a way that there was no darkness in that very small space of time, and a man could do whatever he wished, as though the sun were there, even remove lice from his shirt, and if they had been on a mountain top, perhaps the sun would never have been hidden from them. In the middle of that moment of time, it is midnight at the equator, and thus, on the contrary, I think that at the winter solstice, and for a few days about it, dawn appears only for the smallest space at Thule, when it is noon at the equator. One day's sail north of that, they did find the sea frozen over. There are many other islands in the ocean to the north of Britain, which can be reached from the northern islands of Britain in a direct voyage of 2 days and nights, with sails filled with a continuously favourable wind. A devout priest told me that in 2 summer days and the intervening night he sailed in a 2-benched boat and entered one of them. There is another set of small islands, nearly all separated by narrow stretches of water. In these, for nearly 100 years, hermits sailing from our country, Ireland, have lived, but just as they were always deserted from the beginning of the world, so now, because of the Northmen pirates, they are emptied of anchorites and filled with countless sheep, and very many diverse kinds of sea birds. I have never found these islands mentioned in the authorities. Let's have a look at some of the maps that depict the islands to the north of Britain. The first one we'll look at is the Ptolemy world map, a map of the world known to the Greco-Roman in the 2nd century, is based on the description contained in Ptolemy's book Geography, written circa 150, and traditionally credited Agathodaimon of Alexandria. It shows not only the winds, but also the first use of longitudinal and latitudinal lines. It specifies terrestrial locations by way of of celestial observations. Geography was translated from Greek into Arabic in the 9th century. The idea of a global coordinate system revolutionized European geographical thought, however, and inspired more mathematical treatment of cartography. The next map we're going to look at is that of Muhammad bin Musa al-Khwarizmi, who lived circa 780 to 850. Khwarizmi was a Persian polymath who produced very seminal works in mathematics, astronomy, and geography. Around 820, he was appointed as the astronomer and head of the library of the House of Wisdom in Baghdad. He revised Ptolemy's geography, listing the longitudes and latitudes of various cities and localities. He produced a set of astronomical tables, as well as describing the use of the astrolabe and the sundial. Khwarizmi also made important contributions to trigonometry, producing accurate sine and cosine tables and the first table of tangents. The next map we're going to look at is the Catalan Atlas, drawn in 1375. An enormous, detailed map described as the most important map of the Middle Ages in the Catalan language. It is the zenith of medieval mapwork, produced in the Mallorcan Cartographic School by Cresc Abraham, a Jewish book illuminator, who was described by a contemporary as a master of mappae mundi, as well as of compasses. This map resided in the Royal Library of France during the reign of King Charles V, having been made for him as a gift, and it is still preserved in the Bibliothèque Nationale de France. You can see the lines of distance crisscrossing the beautiful pictures showing the peoples and cities and kings of the world, the Balearics and Sardinia and Corsica with gold, and the Catalan flag. There are numerous descriptions in Catalan, and you can also see the Silk Road. The last map that we shall spend some time looking at is the Carta Marina, or the Carta Marina et Descriptio Septentrionalium Terrarum. A map initially published in 1539, drawn up by the Swedish ecclesiastic Olaus Magnus. That shows Scandinavia and the north. You can see the stars that resemble compass roses, marking distances between points for navigation purposes. resolution here. You can see all of the beautiful detail in this map. The animals and people, men having battles with large guns, spears. We have birds and boars, and all manner of mustelids, weasels, sables, marmots. There are men having a battle up here in the Gulf of Finland, and some wolves eating an animal. Birds, water birds, men in boats, fishing and on horseback, and men with bows and arrows. Going up past Estonia and Lithuania into Lapland, we can see a creature that looks like a lion and a man wearing tartan. We see some monks and some more men on horseback and with spears. And we also see some men who seem to be contending with creatures resembling sea lions or seals. And below that you can see some strange horse-driven boats, a large chicken, and lots of men on horseback again, some sea monsters, a dragon, and lots of reindeer, and some men in a carriage with bows and arrows, in a reindeer-pulled carriage there. Beautiful, beautiful detail with the animals. As we go down into Sweden and Norway, you can see the beautiful detail in the lakes and forests and fjords. And as we near the coast, we can see some more sea monsters, a sea cow, and even a lobster, a sea snake, and some ships contending with the sea monsters. There is Pytheas' congealed sea, the ice flows of the far north Arctic, more sea monsters, a strange red man sweeping the house, a man on skis with a bow and arrow hunting this creature here that seems to be pooing, a water spout, a giant sea serpent, a man fishing. And over towards the coast of Scotland, we can go north to the Shetlands here, and the Orkneys there. Moving north, we find the Faroes and this island of Thule in amongst the sea monsters and the strange creatures of the mystical north. Even a narwhal is visible there, near Iceland. That is our beautiful Carta, Marina. Thank you, my friend, for spending this time in the study with me. I hope you've enjoyed the maps, the history,